Hey everyone, welcome to yet another episode of our alphabetical taboo busting journey. Today is M for manipulation. Now, some of you that have been following for a while may remember back in C when we talked about control, and we mentioned that we wanted to talk about control from the point of view of not controlling others, but rather of feeling in or out of control. So part of the reason was because today we want to talk about the control over other people in the form of manipulation. So not to manipulate when you come into this conversation, Sylvia, but I want to welcome you as always to the show.
Thank you. And I don't see it as manipulation at all. I see it as a very warm invitation. So thank you for your partnership, friendship, and collaboration, my friend.
Well, always a pleasure. No, it's interesting to think about manipulation from a variety of points of view, because I know we've talked about a number of different ways, including partially within the control episode, partially within judgment. And, before we started recording, we started diving into a number of different types of manipulation we've both felt subjected to. And we were questioning what constitutes manipulation. And I was saying that from my perspective, there kind of has to be an intention where if it's truly manipulation, there is that sense of whether you call it manipulation or not, where you know that you're hitting on some points that you think are going to make someone act differently to your benefit. Would you agree?
I do agree. And I like to add to it by saying that while the intention is absolutely there, that act of manipulating is basically someone grasping at straws. And I'll get into that in a moment. Yet, right, so the intention to get what they want, maybe at the expense of someone else, absolutely. I think that is the core. And I would venture to also say that while the intent is not per se, the deal breaker, because we all have wants and needs, right? Let's just admit that. Yet it's then that very unsavory tactic that we'll get into in a moment that I think really makes it an absolutely disgusting practice to me personally.
I absolutely agree. And, some of those tactics may not be clear to people in the moment, because I think it depends on, I guess, the situation you're in and the perspective you bring into the conversation. And I think it's the reason why we see a lot of it being used against people in either vulnerable or almost naive situations, where I've seen people in the corporate world be offered amazing job opportunities, be upfront enough to talk to their current managers about it, only for them to be told, you're not ready for that sort of thing. Or, oh, imagine if this is coming your way now, imagine if you work for us for, 12 or 18 months more, imagine who'll be coming after you then. And they'll dress it up as if it's in that person's best interest. And for sure, there are probably instances out there, there's someone in the comment section going, but what if nothing? I'm sure there's exceptions that prove the rule and everything, but there's still a rule to be proven. There are these people that just utilize the fact that this is a person who was kind-hearted or naive enough to bring this up to their current workplace, thinking they'd support them, and then get pushed into a place where they feel indebted to this place. And there are even people that take the more aggressive stance of, oh, so you're going there? Don't you feel like you owe us, at least a little bit more after everything we've done for you? In which place it just becomes, as I've talked about in a couple of videos on LinkedIn, that corporate loyalty becomes just like a toxic relationship.
Well, you bring up two scenarios that I personally experienced, so I'm going to get really raw and open here. So with that first scenario of someone going, if you just stayed here for a couple more years, you'd be more ready. So I had a situation where I informed a leader that, I'm ready for bigger and more. And he literally said, you're not ready. So my first response was, whose fault is that? If I've been here for X number of years, and you look at me and you go, you're not ready for that next thing, and I was your leader, so whose fault whose fault is that, right? If you've taught me literally nothing in the time for me to be here to get to, or, during the time that I was here for me to get to the next level, I'm going to I am going to venture to say that that leader has to take some responsibility, which is exactly my point. I go, so I literally just ask, whose fault is that? If I'm not ready, if I lack the readiness that you believe I have as a rising leader, right, and that I need to simmer here some more. So let's just not even talk about fault for a minute. I go, if I were to stay here, what will you do to help me get ready for that next thing? Because isn't that what leaders are supposed to do? Then he dissolved into basically a very inappropriate person. I mean, just after that, because what he was not willing or have the courage, he lacked the courage to say, I don't want you to go because you're my top producer and I'm afraid of what would happen. Now, if he had just said that, Sylvia, I really don't want you to go. I really literally, I need you to stay here for at least another 6 months, and I'm going to make it worth your while because I know this is about you and me and all of us. Fair, right? Okay. I didn't come to you for money. That's not the point. But let's hear it, right? Like what would it take, right? What would be worth my wow? If growth and opportunities and expansion are what I'm after, how are you going to do that? Or how are we going to create that? Fair conversation, right? So now that becomes a legitimate negotiation, not like, wow, you're not ready. Like I want to protect you. And that brings me to the second story, like and I'll share that in just a second. And I love your feedback on this, but it's like that is manipulative. And I think you're right. There was that intention, right? Of like, oh, I want her to stay. I need her to stay. But then it was that lack of finesse, right? Of saying like, oh, I don't know how to get that outcome and or acknowledge my own fears. So we have now basically a flop on a number of in a number of areas, right? Like communication, intention, negotiation, right? Driving outcomes, achieving common success. We failed across all of those and more.
Yeah, and I think it often comes down to what you learn. Because you said it's a case of them not knowing how else to say or achieve these things.
Yeah.
And I think whether you look at it from a personal relationship perspective and often what you learn from friends and family, or whether you look at it from a point of view of, let's just face it, salespeople they have the bad reputation they have due to a history of manipulation.
Right.
There's the classic cliche of the snake oil salesperson,
Well, yeah. And we've talked about, right, the manipulative questions that we hear in sales pitches, right? And they drive me crazy, not only because they're manipulative, they're actually like beyond basic. I'm like, really? That's low quality shit. Like, right? It's like, don't you want to improve? What? Like, what kind of question is that? Like, don't you want to be more successful? What kind of question is that? Like, right? It's like that to me, again, is somebody flopping on the technique, right? Of how do we engage? How do we drive the outcome that we want? Which is, even, let's just be honest, like in sales, our outcome is that the other person would want to procure our services and products. That is the goal. Let's not kid ourselves. But if you don't know how to get there and you resort to these, I'm going to call them just basic questions. Let's just like throw the word out the window for now, but they're just basic. That's low quality stuff. Like, it's like, don't you want to? And then what? Like, if the other person says no, and then what? No, I don't. Are you going to debate them? Or if they say yes, then what? Like, they're like, yeah, I guess. And then what? Like, you have nothing to build on, like, other than, great, let me shove you this product. This product will then absolutely do what you have dreamed of always. That's where the snake oiliness comes in.
Yeah, it's like I received an email the other day that was literally like the vaguest, shittiest email I've gotten in so long. Because
I bet we got the same one.
it was flat out like, we help people like you achieve their goals. And I'm like, and then it just had like a calendar link, and I'm there like, which goals? What people like me? Like, how do you do that? What do you do? And it feels to me like what you said, they're just trying to get a yes. And I once challenged someone on this who was asking questions like, do you want to be more successful, or is there room for improvement, as if there isn't always. And I asked what the idea was behind that question, and the person said that they'd been told that if you got someone to say yes a few times, it lowered the likelihood of them saying no eventually. And I decided to take it into a bit of absurdity, and I was like, okay, have you tried asking them if they like chocolate? Have you tried asking them if they've had water today? And they're like, oh no, that's not relevant to the sales call. And I'm like, neither is whether they want to improve or not, to be honest.
Well, so again, right? You hit it so beautifully hit the nail so beautifully on the head in that, like, the getting them to say yes again. That is the outcome, no doubt, right? We in sales would want more yeses than nos. That is a fact, and that's what our brains crave. That is a fact. Yet again, right? That the technique is missing. It's like that is a great outcome overlaid to something basic that has little to no relevance, or it wouldn't really drive that outcome. So let's just say like this idea, right? So I do talk about getting to yes, right? How do we help somebody to learn to say yes? But that is with the assumption that what we're providing is actually of value, right? There has to be commensurate value, right? Of what you want to give and get, right? To what they're taking and receiving, experiencing, right? They're like, and the yes has to come from someone acknowledging that it's worth their while to say yes, not like just because you have 3 low quality yeses to 3 low quality questions doesn't mean success. Like, but again, that's somebody, I think, literally bastardizing a strategy or a part of a strategy and then calling it a skill. And I'm just like, no.
Well, it's like playground psychology. It's like talking to someone and being like, do you like this? Do you like that? And you're trying to get them to say yes, and then you're like, will you give me your money? Like, and you're trying to like fool them into saying yes. And like that's fine if you're like 8 and you're trying to fool someone into like a gotcha situation. But like if you're selling technology or something, I feel like you might have to resort to something a little bit more advanced than patty cakes.
Well, I'm actually going to challenge that for a second. So I agree with you. Yeah, I'll offer an alternative to that thinking, or addition, not an alternative, addition to that thinking. It can actually backfire even in basic scenarios. So I went to the bank not long ago. So I walked into my bank and I go, hi, I would like to consider a different business account. So a different type of business account. So this thing, my needs have changed. I no longer want to, do it like this. I want to do it like that. And this person probably had a quota to sell other products, right? So then instead of asking questions, she went straight into, sort of pitching. And then when she knew that I was disengaged, she then asked really basic questions, again, low quality questions, like, well, it was something like, do you want more convenience? No, I want life harder. Like, what the fuck? Like, like, but it was like, but she was, I knew, right? Again, if she had even looked at what I did, she wouldn't have asked this question. So talk about lack of research or, strategic thinking. But so she wanted to get me into that yes pattern, right? So she's like, would you like more convenience? I'm like, what if I said yes? She goes, I'm going to take that as a yes. I'm like, you can take it as whatever you want. Okay. And it was kind of like, would you like more digital options? Again, what if I said yes? But she was trying to get me into this pattern, right? Yeah. Of saying yes, low quality questions. And then she was like, would you be open to a 1 hour this and that and that and that and that to do blah, 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 blah? I go, no. I just said no.
Yeah.
She was like, okay. Like, but it was like, again, right? Like so it's fine that if you want to go for the basic path of getting somebody to a yes, But if you're not, if you're not ready for the no, you have no substance again, right? It's like, or like if you build in such a way that is so basic that is only binary, then the no will likely come out just as much as the yes. So again,
Yeah.
like it's a misinformed, weak strategy at best, right?
Yeah.
And yet, like, I think she was stunned that like I wasn't wowed by like the idea of convenience, more digital options, whatever else. I think she even said something like, "Would you like to personalize this or that?" Like, oh yeah, would you like to personalize with your own logo on your debit card for your business? I'm like, how does that help me drive my business? Right? Again,
Well,
it's like,
well, you might be at a Starbucks and you're paying, and the barista goes, "Whoa, you're that Sylvia? Let me take a card. I'm gonna buy some sales training because these mochas aren't moving themselves." Um,
the velocity and volume of sales of mocha frappuccinos are not where they
yeah,
ought
man.
to be, and you were the gal to solve that problem for me. Oh, okay.
But honestly, though, like for me, I think it's interesting to look at that spectrum though, because what you've just described with that bank interaction is like on the more harmless side of the manipulation spectrum.
Agreed.
It can still be manipulation
Yeah.
because we've all heard of things, especially back in sort of 2007 pre-recession times, where banks were selling these absurd loans in some countries
Mm,
around the world, including Iceland, where
mm.
people just went bankrupt afterwards because they were sold this dream of, if Iceland does really well, then this and that. But spoiler alert, Iceland did not do very well. Neither did pretty much anyone except for the banks. But it's interesting to see that scale of like
Mm.
how manipulation can shove itself into so many different things. Where again, for me, it seems to come down to intent. If you're intending to mislead someone, and to your
Mm.
point, having that binary road where it's not really a
Yeah.
discussion, it's
Mm.
someone leading you down a path. And I think
Yeah.
actually that path probably leads quite nicely into your second story.
I just had an insight. So your intention point is absolutely spot on. I think I even feel more energized by it now that I'm thinking of my second scenario. So let me give the context. So I had decided to leave this one role that I was at for just over 2 years, and I left because my leader at the time, in my opinion, and after much observation, was not of integrity. So I had a lot of ethical dilemmas with this person and their behaviors, both internally and externally. So they're just, from a philosophical and values perspective, like it was a struggle. So I said, like, to honor my ethics and my values, I have to leave.
Hmm.
So when I told him as much, he asked to speak with me, and his first point was that I cannot leave because, well, his whole point was, so he basically asked, "Where am I going?" I go, "I'm going nowhere. I'm just leaving, right? Because I just don't want to be here anymore. It's not suitable for me to be here any longer," I think was what I said. And yeah, so his first point was, basically that um, I couldn't go anywhere else because he had to defend me in front of people within the firm. So I go, interesting point you make. I literally go, then why are you just now telling me that I had behavioral problems that you needed to stand up for me on? This is literally over 700 days of me being here. You've had over 700 daily chances to tell me that I had problems that you had to, what, defend me on, be my defender and protector? Why are you just now telling me this? But what he didn't say was, like, he wanted me to feel wounded, right? He probably felt wounded by my rejection of saying that he was this or that. I hadn't even gotten there yet. I hadn't even said you're unethical. I hadn't even gotten to that point yet. But there was some, I don't know, weirdness about like me leaving, right? So he didn't like that I was leaving. But instead of going, "I don't like that you're leaving," he decided to wound me, to go, "You are flawed. You have a problem. People didn't like you, and I defended you." So I go, and then, like, right, he really didn't answer the question of like why he was just then telling me after 700 days, give or take. And then he was like, well, I was protecting you. Now, so let's take that apart for a second. Even if he did that, which I know he didn't do, I'm sure he added fuel to the fire. Like, looking back, like, honestly, I go, even if he did protect me, like, again, if he really felt that I owed him because of the protection, so he was my personal mafia, fine. If I owed him that, then just say it, right? Say, Sylvia, you may not have seen it, but I did a number of things, and I feel like we need to settle that before you depart. Assuming that you're going to depart, but I believe that you owe me protection money or time, right? Your value and or your effort and you know, whatever, right? So okay, something of value from my end is owed for that protection that I didn't sign up for, by the way. Okay, then let's negotiate that, right? Like, is that a dollar amount? Is that I got to do time, community service, right? But
Yeah,
instead, he kept doubling down on that. Yeah.
yeah, because for him, there probably wasn't a deeper plan than just getting you to stay indefinitely. And it's the same tactic that's used in so many different emotional manipulations.
100%.
It's, you know,
100%. Yeah.
it's someone breaking up with someone else and them saying, oh, you know, you'll struggle to find someone as good as me, or who'll treat you this way, who will, you know, accept you as you are. And it's about making you, like you said, making you feel wounded, making you feel
Yes.
like there's nowhere else for you to go.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it's a classic abusive gaslighting
100%.
tactic. And it's interesting how, you know, if you think about it in the grand scheme of things,
Mm-hmm.
if someone you find valuable is leaving, do you really want them to stay on because you've put them down rather than letting them go? And if you truly believe your company is the best place for them, why not see if they come back? I know plenty of people who have worked for the same company more than once throughout their lives because they've come back in a different function,
Mm-hmm.
not only more inspired to work for that previous company, but more, they've learned more, they've grown, they come back with massive experience and ideas, but they haven't come back because the boss went, you know what, you're crap, you need to learn more, you know, I defended you, you owe me your time.
Mm-hmm.
That's never something that's going to inspire that person to come in. That's like kicking them over a bridge, burning it, and being like, swim back.
Well, and to amplify what you said earlier about the intention, right? So this mofo, literally, his intention might have been to keep me, right? Yet he then deviated. So this is how stupid manipulators are. Like, so his original intent was like, oh fuck, like, I don't want her to leave. How do I get her to stay? That should have been the outcome, or right, like, that's the intention. The outcome is that she stays, right? The intention is let's keep her some way, somehow. But where then he effed up was his own shit, right? Like he literally goes, oh, I'm going to injure her emotionally so she feels this small, right? So she'll stay, because this is like, I'm going to tell her that this is the only place that she'll succeed. Now, that's stupidity. That's stupidity at its core, right? It's like, so you had an intention, bad or good, we're not going to judge that for now. You have an outcome that you want to get to, and yet you do something so contrary to the intention and the outcome that, like, not only that, to your point, right, not only is this person going to walk out now, they're going to walk out and never come back and make sure nobody else comes here.
Oh yeah, and if you and I'm sure if you checked that company's Glassdoor reviews, I'm sure there have been some reviews that have left that sort of thing. I've worked for a company that had so many similar reviews because of manipulation and all sorts of different behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Where when I was working there, I had someone apply who asked me flat out about the reviews, and
Mm-hmm.
you stood there and you go, like, if you know about it, you're
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't have it in me to lie about it, but at the same time, it's like, and I think for me that's why, similar to your story,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit earlier than I was asked about it was when I decided to go, because there was just this point where I went, you know what, I can't feel myself when in that sort of environment,
Yeah.
because it's either speak up or shut up, and
Mm-hmm.
knowing myself, shutting up isn't really an option most of the
Right.
time.
Right. 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 Well, and to your point again, right? Like I feel like this whole idea of intent, I think was so I actually have some compassion for manipulators, not because like of what they do, but like it's that lack that they have, right? So they lack the skills, the hearts, right? The know-how, the vulnerability, the bravery. They lack in so many ways. It's almost pitiful, right? Because if you really think about it, it's like, why do they manipulate in the first place? Well, it's because they lack something, right? And they want something. And instead of learning the skill and the tactics and the techniques to do it the proper way, that's a shortcut.
Yeah,
Or to, I think your point, right? I think earlier in our conversation, or even before the recording, it's like they just hadn't been taught better, or that's how they've been rewarded or seen results, right?
yeah,
And they didn't do the diagnosis of, oh, actually like I only won because that other person didn't know better. But when they do know better, guess what, they're gonna pack their bags.
yeah. And the thing is, you see it all the time with a certain type of leader. I'll just put
Mm-hmm.
that in air quotes
Mm-hmm.
because,
Mm-hmm. They're not real leaders.
um, whether, with those sorts of leaders, they surround themselves with sycophantic yes men, because as soon as someone comes in that rocks the boat,
Mm.
it it takes their power away. And
Yeah. Yeah.
similar to what you said, there is a certain level of compassion that I have towards those sorts of people, because I know that they learn it from somewhere. They don't wake up one day and go, "I'm going to be evil." it's
100%. Yeah.
yeah, it's a sense of, whether they learned it through a mentor
Mm.
or family member or
Yeah.
whatever. It's a behavior that you learn, and you need to unlearn if you want to get away from it, because it is, we all go through the day looking to achieve what we want to achieve,
Yeah.
and we use what we have. For those people, the tools that they have, whether they realize it or not, are
Mm.
manipulative.
Yeah.
And and I
Totally.
think I think we have a number of different ways to approach the topic, and we can probably talk about it for days. But in the interest of sort of starting to wrap it up, I know this episode has been focused a lot on complaining about things and talking about not exactly the positive side of things,
Mm.
which leads us nicely into next week's episode. If you want more of that, because taboo of next week is N for negativity. So if you're up for some negativity, I guess, but probably shown in a mix of negative and positive light, definitely tune in next week, because I'm quite excited to talk about how we can view negativity as a taboo, but also how
Mm.
we can, I guess, redefine a little bit what's positive and negative in
Mm.
communication and relationships.
Yeah, and I'm excited to dive into it with you because of the awareness piece, right? Again, so for today, I really hope that we didn't come off just complaining about manipulation yet. I really do hope that people walked away being aware, or more aware, that there might be something in their midst doing such a thing, right? And calling it something else. Like I got into a debate with somebody over the weekend about what really is positivity, what really, right? And I've also had conversations with other people about influence and charisma. But I will tell you that a lot of times manipulation is dressed up, right? It's literally, it just has makeup, but right, like, and made up to look like charisma or influence or persuasion, when it actually is emotional manipulation. So I hope that awareness was somewhere was made possible somewhere during our discussion today, and same with next week's conversation. That I think we're all aware that negativity exists, uh, yet I think what I'm excited to explore with you is how can we help people not only spot it, but to perhaps maybe call it out in someone in a way that would not feel taboo, or would be constructive and in service of the other person. Because I've been down that path of like being super negative. I've been around people who are programmed to be negative, and I always now look back and go, I just didn't know better, right? I didn't know a better option or an additional option. So my choice was literally just that one thing, right? One little thing. So my hope is that we do bring awareness. So until next week, my friend, stay well, and
You too.
more to come.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Likewise. Bye for now.
Bye.